Hi, welcome back to the Dialed In Angling Podcast, presented by Strike Master Augers, Onyx Fish, and St. Croix Rods. This week on Dialed In Angling, the podcast, we just went and fished Red Lake and absolutely smashed the big crappies. Didn't just catch the big crappies, absolutely smashed them. We had to put in a ton of work to get on those fish. We had to drill lots of holes. I don't want to paint a picture that it's just super easy to drill one hole and catch a whole bunch. That's not what it was about. It was like hunting fish, running them down like we're really good at. I love hunting fish. This was the perfect opportunity to do so. Also in the podcast, or later in the podcast, we're going to discuss kind of the season as a whole. I just want to review. I have an opportunity this week to fish with various individuals from all sorts of different businesses across the ice fishing landscape, if you will. So we're going to have an interview with the fish house company. We're going to have an interview with a few other anglers that I fish with. Otter is going to get on and talk about how dramatically different last season was to this season. So we got a lot to cover in the podcast. But first, I'm going to introduce Nick Sakella. Him and I were partners in crime up on Red Lake, catching those big crappies. I don't know about you, Nick, but I can't even think straight. I've been getting up in the morning dreaming about getting back up there and catching those fish. I cannot wait till people watch Dialed In Angling to see how we go about catching those fish, man. The crappies are back.
Yeah, they are. That's for sure. And yeah, you said it right. It was absolutely spectacular. Just so much fun. Part of the hard part about getting on them is chasing them and finally finding them and have them sit still and catch them. And that's why it's so much more rewarding. It was just an absolute blast. The fish are so big and they are definitely back.
I got to say, I'm all about catch and release when it comes to quality and caliber of fish like that. I mean, we threw all those fish back. I don't mind throwing fish back of that size. I don't mind keeping fish either, but I couldn't even imagine putting a knife to some of those crappies. They are so big. And, I've experienced the Red Lake crappies before, but you forget the size structure and how big those fish actually are. And we did actually catch a few smaller eater size that you could have kept if you wanted to harvest a few. But I'm just urging listeners, if you're heading up there and you want to experience Red Lake crappie fishing, we're going to give you some insight on how to do so. And obviously, if you watch Dialed In Angling, we kind of lay it all out for you. But I encourage everybody, throw those great big ones back. Keep a few of the smaller ones. This resource already disappeared once. I would love to see it stay. I think I even said in Dialed In Angling, it's been like 2 or 3 years since I've caught crappies on Red because I just don't fish up there that much. I fish early ice up there. We filmed some Dialed In Angling. I love going up there early ice. And you and I have caught big crappies early ice, but it doesn't seem like it's until later in the season when you see those bigger schools. So it's been a while since I've gone up this has been, probably at least 3 years since I've specifically chased crappies, and it was a gas. We saw school sizes that were 4 or 5 fish to schools that were 50 fish, right?
Yep.
And they all reacted differently. Some schools you got on, they were, a few of them, we'd walk over the top of them and they're gone. We know that. We've experienced that on a lot of other lakes. Now with forward-facing sonar, it's been happening probably for decades, but now that we can see it unfold, it kind of changes the way you fish. And then we had schools that kind of just hung there. We were able to kind of beat on them and catch them and get them back down and fish as fast as possible. I think we did it even in the episode where one person catches one and then you run to that hole and you drop down a presentation and you catch one and you kind of keep them interested, almost like you're catching jumbo perch.
Correct. Yeah. It's as fast as you can get back down there and keep that school going because they are on the move. There's no doubt about that. Fishing them basins, there's nothing really holding them fish there. So they're roaming. So they're here and they're gone. So getting back down there and capitalizing when you do get on a school is a big part of it. And back where you're saying, releasing these fish are in the caliber, I'd say, of a 30-inch walleye, if you want to say, put it towards a walleye standards. I mean, they are a special fish, and absolutely please selective harvest on these fish because it is an incredible resource that I'd love to not have go extinct again.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it in those terms because they are. I mean, I've caught lots of 14 and 15-inch crappies all over Minnesota, North Dakota, Canada, and the size structure of these fish are quite different.
Yeah,
I think
thick.
they're thick, and I don't know, I'd have to talk to a biologist, but I got to believe, it's Red Lake is just one of those lakes that's super fertile, right? There's tons of bait. I'm guessing there's lots of different invertebrates. There's plankton. There's all sorts of different food sources for them, but different from, let's say, a small lake where the panfish primarily feed on bugs.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think once they get to a certain size, there's so much bait on red that they just grow enormous because of all the shiners and
Yeah, I
and
think
bait in
that's
the
what
lake.
it is these fish they're eating minnows, 90% of the time, I think. I'm sure they're eating bugs too, but eating minnows is like eating a ribeye steak for them fish instead of, bugs. So they're going to grow a lot faster and a lot bigger, just because of that reason alone.
I don't want to spoil the episode because I want people to watch Dialed In Angling and see how we go about finding these fish and then ultimately catching these fish. But I will say, and I said it in the episode, if you're heading up to red, okay, you're going to have to work as a team to catch them, right? Absolutely. Work as a team, bring plenty of batteries for your auger. The ice is thick right now. We're starting to lose some shoreline stuff, not only on red, but a lot of these lakes. So I think in the next few weeks, really, if you're planning a trip in the next couple weeks up to red, I would seriously think about bringing a four-wheeler or snowmobile. We saw some rough ice. We saw some heaves. We saw some different things that would lead me to believe that truck and vehicle traffic's kind of the thing is going to be going away very quickly, right, Nick?
Yeah, no, for sure. And if you look at the extended forecast, it's not going to cool down much. It's going to stay these great temperatures for a while. So, which makes, springtime fishing awesome. No one wants to be out there with gloves on when they can be in 40 degrees and the sun's shining. It makes it so much more enjoyable. So,
We filmed Dialed In Angling this week. It was nice out there. It was a little chilly. I mean, we had a little bit of a wind, but it was pretty darn nice. Considering a week ago it was 30 below, and now we're on Red Lake. You and I didn't have hats on. We'd have gloves on. We're just running around, grabbing fish out of holes, putting forward-facing sonar down, drilling with augers, picking up augers out of the slush. No gloves.
yeah.
It was really fun to be out there experiencing spring-like weather in February. Let's be honest. I mean, it's still February here. So any kind of March type of weather that we can get in February, I'm all for it. I could think of times where, let's say the closer of walleye or right at the end of February, it was nasty cold, still in that 20 below. I know the average temperatures are probably 20 to 30, but that doesn't mean anything. I remember fishing in the first part of March, even when it was 10, 15 below. And that's not the case. Like you said, the extended forecast looks good. I'm a little worried about the landings myself, but just because red's so shallow. But a lot of these lakes, even we've been fishing Mille Lacs. I fished a bunch of small lakes around Winnie this week. And the landings, especially on the north sides of the lakes, are getting pretty. I wouldn't say you couldn't not drive, but I would use caution, and it's just the landings because once you get out on the ice, there's tons of ice.
Tons.
So getting back to, let's talk a little bit about the history of the crappies on red. I know for me personally, I wouldn't say I missed out on the boom, but I was kind of like late to the party when it came to the crappie boom. Like it was like the late 90s, early 2000s. What had happened is the lake itself had kind of crashed as far as walleye populations, and there just wasn't a lot of people fishing red. I know a lot of the resorts were kind of just barely hanging on. They had major issues with walleye populations, so people kind of left the lake, and crappies really filled that void. And they just kind of hatched, and they had no predators, so they took off in the system, right? And so with that void of nobody fishing and, no fishing pressure and nobody out there to kind of detect them, they boomed. And I remember hearing stories of like planes flying over and they could see these massive schools of something and they weren't sure what they were. Come to find out they were crappies. They could see the dark in the water. And, I don't know if that's just a wives' tale or secondhand story that it's evolved, but that's what I always heard.
Over the last few years, I'd say the last 5 years, I've kind of almost been noticing Red Lake change their wall in terms of walleyes. We're starting to see bigger fish.
Yeah, look at when we filled Dial-In
Yep,
Angling.
exactly. I feel like the walleye fishing is almost kind of slowed down. Like we whenever you go to Red, you catch fish, but I remember a few years ago where it was just incredible, and I almost feel like the walleye fishing has maybe slowed down a little bit, and maybe that's part of the reason the crappies are starting to come back, a little less predators. I don't know.
Well, here's my take. So let's finish up with the history. So they see these big schools of crappies, and then boom, it's like a modern day gold rush, right? People up there in droves. I mean, I just remember hearing everyone was going to Red Lake to catch the crappies. I got up there a little bit late. I would say it was kind of a couple years after that. So I think when they found those schools was like 98, 99, maybe a year prior to that, but it was in that time frame. And I was kind of up there in the early 2000s. And I remember going there, and it was like a steady line of headlights coming off the lake or going on the, I mean, you were literally in a traffic jam, and you get out there and like, where do we go? And they're like, just go to the end of the road, take a right, And the first time I fished there, I went out on Red, they said there's a white fish house out there. So I drove out. It was during the week, and I got to the end of the road, and it was really a nice day. I think it was like February timeframe. I take a right, go by the White House, and I look over, and there's some holes that are open, right? And somebody had obviously been fishing. There was some minnow heads and things laying there. I'm not kidding you. I dropped my flasher down, and the whole screen lit up, and I caught crappies like one after another. Okay. And the first time I went to Red, this is 2002, 2001, whatever year it was. And I kept 10 crappies, like bang, 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 right? Kept 10 crappies from the bucket. They filled the bucket. I was just amazed at how giant they were. Drove off the lake, came back a couple weeks later. I had a fish fry, and I was like, this didn't taste like. To me, I know people say I'm crazy and I'll probably get bashed for it, but I just didn't think they tasted that good. I went back the next time, and I didn't care about keeping my 10. All I cared about was catching them. And the next time I had to drill a lot of holes. And what I did is I just drilled all the way along this ice heave. They said they were catching them along the ice heave. And that year, this is 2002, taking you back. That year, the ice heave was massive. I mean, it was 15 feet in the air. And we had drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled. And I'm telling you, I drilled 3-4 tanks of gas in my auger. And I was ready to give up. And I actually had, the spot I had gotten out in was right next to my truck. So I drilled the first hole, and then you keep going, right? I walked all the way back to my truck, completely exhausted, had trudged the snow, the slush, get back to my truck. I'm like, this is it. These are the last holes I'm drilling, and then I'm heading home. I'm not kidding you. It was like the second hole for my truck.
Yeah.
Because I was so mad. I had drilled like 50 holes after that, thinking, okay, this is my last stand. And like the second hole for my truck, they were loaded, and I threw them back. And I couldn't even tell you how many fish I caught. I was just catching them like crazy. As fast as you get it down there, throwing those fish back. But it brought me back with this trip with us going to Red Lake. When we landed on a few of those schools, especially towards the end, that weren't moving, it brought me back to my youth of dropping down, catching one, and just seeing that Markham or that graph image of them loaded down there, not moving. And as fast as you could get it down there, didn't matter what you had on, didn't matter if you had bait on. And so kind of that nostalgia factor of those fish, and then catching those fish in the manner that we did, and the size structure of the fish that we caught definitely took me back.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable once you get one of them schools to sit, how aggressive they are. I don't know of another place where crappies are that aggressive. It doesn't matter what you have on.
No, I've never. Like I said, I've caught the giant crappies in Canada. I've caught some really big ones out in North Dakota. Devil's Lake has giant crappies. I've caught big fish kind of all over. Minnesota, northern Minnesota, Wisconsin. These fish are by far the most aggressive crappies that you'll ever see in your life, if you can land on them.
Yep.
But typical crappies, they're there and gone. You can't count on those fish holding. We had 2 or 3 schools that held
tight.
The rest of them, we had to work for them. I've said it time and time again on Dialed In Angling. I don't mind working for fish. You and I both guide. That's what we do to get fish all the time is work for them. It never just comes to you easily. Most of the time you have to work for them. Most of the time you find yourself drilling and drilling and drilling until you land on that school. It's hardly ever do you kind of throw the proverbial dart at a dartboard and land on them. You have to generally work for those fish. But
Absolutely.
when you're dealing with something that special and that big, I'll put in work all day long. I still have blisters on my heels. My socks were like sliding down in my boots because we were running so fast to try to get in front of those schools. It was a riot. I said to you multiple times, I don't know if the camera guy caught it or if they'll use those clips on Dialed In Angling, but I said to you multiple times, I was like, this is like pheasant hunting. It's like trying to pin down pheasants in a field where we're working together, drilling one way, moving one way, and trying to pinch those fish into one particular location so we could get on top of them.
Yeah, that's a big point to be made is these fish move so fast. It's not that you're not seeing fish, but it's just being able to drill the hole, get on top of them and catch those fish. They are never ever stop moving, and you have to work as a team. You have to have someone drilling, someone ready to catch. As soon as that hole is open, get down on them fish because they are there and they're gone.
Yeah, I think if listeners or somebody listening to this is thinking about going to red, highly recommend it. Get up there. Obviously the ice is, the shorelines anyway are deteriorating, but get up there while it's still, I think this is fresh. I think the last few years that we've been seeing increases in crappie populations, but get up there. But the one thing, bring plenty of batteries for your auger and then plan on working for them. Mm-hmm. Just sitting in one spot catching them is tough. I mean, it really is. We saw some people kind of hanging out, and I'm guessing those schools will come through.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But
guess some.
I don't know if I don't even want to describe it as running and gunning. It's like running and running, running and drilling, right?
Yeah, it's nonstop. You're not going to get cold doing this. I guarantee that.
No.
You will be taking layers off because it is work. Luckily, we don't have tons of snow to dredge through, which makes it a lot easier, but it is running and running and drilling and running, and then they're not there. They're 10 feet over, run again, drill again.
It's a perfect opportunity to like bring kids out fishing or teenagers or someone that's ready to just kind of drill holes and be mobile with you. Yep. We drug kind of our otter sleds, our small little otter sleds. We had some forward-facing sonars. We had our Markhams. We had our rods. We stayed 100% mobile. You can't get more mobile than what we were doing. And we just plant the trucks. That's the other thing is like these fish are spooky. So don't drive over the top of them, right? Yep. Pull up to a spot, grab your otter sled, start moving around, trying to kind of go in different directions if you can. We worked as a team. We'd kind of split up at times and then we'd come back together. So, you can kind of talk back and forth to the anglers you're fishing with and just kind of pick different directions till you divide and conquer is kind of what we did to find those fish. So beyond that, I am not going to spoil out any more of the episode. I want people to watch this. I think people will be amazed at the size of the fish and just the overall quality of the fish. We did catch some smaller ones, but
which is good to see.
Which was a couple, which is great to see for another year class. But you could definitely see there's like 3 real defined year classes, right? Yep. There's the megas, and then there's like those kind of, I would say 12 to 14 inchers. Yep. And then you had some like 10, 11 inchers. Mm-hmm. So 3 good year classes. Now, talking, or reverting back to the history of this and how this crappie boom sort of disappeared within a matter of a decade, right? You had so many anglers and so much fishing pressure that they were there to target and harvest those crappies, completely disappeared, right? Went by the wayside. And I think not all of it had to do with harvest. I think if you talk to biologists, they stocked walleyes. The walleyes came back. The crappies weren't all by themselves anymore. So you kind of had some of that. But now they're back. And I think I'm with you in the sense where I don't think that Red Lake walleye fishing's tough. I really don't. I think it's still pretty good.
Oh, absolutely.
But I will agree with you. Look at when we filmed Dialed In Angling. Like if any of our listeners, if you go to YouTube, you can look up Red Lake Trophies. That was the episode you and I shot. We went out on Red Lake. We got about a 28-inch walleye. We got a 40-inch pike, and we filmed in a matter of 6-7 hours. We were out there. We only fished 2 spots. We moved shallower on the second spot. And we weren't the only ones catching big fish. I remember talking to several other anglers, even some of my buddies that had been out there. They got some 27s, they got some 25s, early ice. Okay. I think later in the season, those big fish tend to hide themselves because they're not eating. Sure. Early in the season, they're feeding, so you're catching those bigger fish. Later in the season, you're just not catching as many bigger fish. You're getting more of those smaller fish. But my point of this is I think there's less walleyes on that end of Upper Red Lake, but the quality's getting better. And then now you're seeing the crappies come back. So maybe it's a more balanced fishery. Correct. Than it was 5-10 years ago. Yep. And so if you're a fan of catching both walleyes and crappies up there, I think we have the best of both worlds. I know for me, like I said earlier in the podcast, I keep dreaming about this bite. Ever since we've been up there earlier this week, that's all I can think about, right? These just megas that we were catching and how special they are. And I want to see this fishery survive. I want to see this crappie fishery and walleye fishery kind of coexist the way it is. And I know in a perfect world, we could have all the anglers doing the right things, and maybe it won't live forever because obviously these fish are going to age out. But for now, if anglers are listening, I just urge people to please release these giants, right? Release these megas. If you're going to harvest a few, great. I'm not opposed to fish fries. I guide for a living. I clean plenty of fish throughout the year, but I'm always adamant about releasing these bigger fish so they can live to bite another day. They can go to spawn. The genetics move on. Big genetics, it's proven. Genetics of panfish, but genetics of bluegills in particular. If you release those big bulls, you're going to have big sunfish. Big crappies, you get genetics of fish like that you can release back into the system. They're going to spawn, recreate, and they're in. Same with walleyes. Same with big pike, like that big pike we caught up there. Yep. Those are great for systems to kind of just, feed on some of these smaller fish and create bigger giants. I'm not a biologist, but I just know I fish enough to see it. When I get to special pan fisheries, you know it when you catch them. And Red Lake is a special place right now.
Absolutely. You nailed it all on the head there. It's 100% that if you keep them fish, they're not going to be there. There might be a cycle where they do peter out or maybe not. But if you keep them fish, it's guaranteed they're not going to be back in there. So please release them big ones. And you do catch the eater size up there too. So keep them ones, get the big ones back, keep the genetics in the lake, and let's keep this ball rolling up there because it is absolutely mind-blowing fun.
It was. It's if I look back in the episodes that we shot this year, I have several favorites. I can think of the Red Lake episode that we shot early ice. That was really fun. Mm-hmm. I love getting up to Red Lake early and catching walleyes. The walleye fishing is still very incredible. You get up there early ice, and it's some of the best fishing in the Midwest. Right. No doubt about it. I can't think of a better ice fishery for early ice walleyes, daytime walleyes, and nighttime really, than Red Lake. I mean, obviously we're blessed in Minnesota. You got Lake of the Woods, you got Red Lake, you got Mille Lacs, you got Leech Lake, you got all these great Winnie, you got Vermilion, you got all these great fisheries, Cabotogama. But when it comes to just an all-around good ice bite, it kind of narrows down, certain bites just sort of die off, and Red Lake doesn't. I mean, it continues, through at least mid-January. Last year, it never died off. It seemed like that walleye bite was good all year. You had oxygen in the water. It was kind of a blip in the radar as far as a weird year, but they bit all year. Now we've got a good balance of crappies, of walleyes. I heard a lot last year about the rumblings of how good this crappie bite was last year. I think you and I both talked about going up and experiencing last year, but we lost ice early and March kind of came up quick and it got really hot and the ice went fast. So I didn't get to an opportunity to do it. It was sort of a bucket list thing for me to get it done this year. I wanted to film dialing and angling up there. You and I have been talking about it all season. Since that first episode of Red Lake Trophies, you and I stayed in constant contact. Like, we got to get up there and strike when the iron's hot. I'm so glad I did. And I'm hoping that I can take my son up there, that we can take generations of people up there, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. And I want to see people experience what we did, man. I really do. We've got something special in Minnesota here, and I'm hoping that, people are conservative enough to let some of those big fish go so that we can see this fishery thrive. I love it. I can't wait to get back up there. I'm just giddy. I'm like a kid, man. When you think of something that special and how cool that bite is, I can't stop thinking about it.
Yep. And the resort we went out of, they're planning on, keeping the roads open as long as they can, weather permitting. But
right on. I think a lot of the resorts up there, they'll move their roads if they've got heaves, or if they got, a lot of these roads, obviously, that they plowed, those are the first ones that are going to get demolished by the sun, right? And so they'll kind of move their mode of operi, and they plan on keeping it open. The resorts are going to benefit from having an extended season because Red Lake's an inland water. So Walleyes closed last Sunday, the 24th. They want to keep it open as long as they can and keep it going as long as they can. So if you're heading up there, call one of the resorts, ask them, how the bite is, if they got roads, how the conditions are. There's a lot of good reports on Facebook, social media, a lot of good people putting great information out there, and people that care about the fishery as much as we do. You're going to want to stay tuned to the podcast because we're going to get more in depth. We're going to go away from Red Lake talk. We're going to get more in depth. I actually got an opportunity to interview different folks in the industry to talk a little bit about how crazy last year was versus this year. Last year was way on the end of the spectrum as far as what I think we'll ever see in our lifetimes as far as a mild winter. This year is more normal, or even to the point where it was like one of the great winters. So we've got this big stark contrast from last year to this year. I want to get some of these other anglers and business owners' input on how they're faring this year, get their take on it. So more to come on the Dialed In Angling podcast after this break. The Dialed In Angling podcast is brought to you by St. Croix Rods, handcrafting the best rods on earth for an elevated angling experience since 1948. St. Croix Rods are truly a world-class brand that has earned the respect and admirations of anglers across the planet. I trust St. Croix Rods, and you should too. Check them out at stcroixrods.com. Okay, my next guests on the Dialed In Angling podcast, they're newbies to the podcast, might I say. Yeti Fish Houses. They manufacture fish houses. They're also in the aluminum business. Voyager Industries owns Yeti Fish Houses. So I'm sitting down with Sonora. She's the marketing specialist. And then also John. He's in charge of all sales at Yetis. Welcome to the podcast, my friends.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Hey, I just want to pick your brain a little bit. The topic of this podcast is just talking with folks in the industry to see how much last season varied from this season. We know last year was hopefully just a blip on the radar, something that we may never see in our lifetimes again. But let's start with you, John, as far as sales. How different is it from last year to this year?
Yeah, it was a drastic difference last year to this year. This year's still slow. It's not where we normally are. The people that purchased last year, a lot of them didn't even get to use their fish houses. The ice season was horrible. And so this year it's kind of a reflection of that and dealer lot inventory being out there. There was a lot to offer people that were sitting on the lots that didn't purchase last year. So we were kind of in a rebound last year, and we're starting to see everything pick up a lot now. Even today, seeing a few of the orders coming in, that it is definitely picking up now.
That's great to see, because I know, driving by lots last year, they were completely full. I was like, wow.
Yes.
And having no ice. I mean, it was a dreadful feeling for someone that, they're trying to sell fish houses, and dealers. A lot of these dealers, it seems like they sell campers, they sell fish houses, but the amount of wheelhouses that I saw sitting on the lots versus this year. And then the new houses that I've been seeing on the lakes, so I've gotten a chance to kind of fish all over the ice belt, but all over Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. And this year, without having snow, the wheelhouses were able to come out in droves. And it seems like there was this kind of, pent up fishing desire where people were like, we're fishing every weekend we can. And I saw that a lot on the lake. So, Sonora, from a marketing perspective, are you seeing a lot more on social media? I mean, how is your job different this year?
Absolutely. Piggybacking off of what you and John said earlier, just everyone getting to be out on the ice longer this year. We've got to be out making content, sharing that user-generated stuff that you guys all share with us as well.
Yeah, I walked into a tackle shop the other day, just a random tackle shop. I was actually looking for some minnows and Eurolarva, and it looked like a bomb had went off. They had just that much inventory was low. It looked like there had been, an ice fishing contest there. And I asked the clerk that was behind the counter, I was like, wow, you must have had a busy weekend. She's like, it's been a busy year. So it's good to see. It's good to see things get back to normal. I know with a big ticket item like a wheelhouse, it takes time for that kind of bell curve to kind of correct itself. But I don't know about you guys, but it feels so good to be back on the ice and have such a normal year and have customer base that's out fishing in our fish houses and just things getting back to normal.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a huge change, even on our home lake. The amount of people back on the ice, it's been almost 2 years since we were all back on the ice together.
Yeah, so I think people forget, on top of last year's blip as far as a weird winter, the winter before we had so much snow that people couldn't get out. We're radically different from this year where everybody can go anywhere.
Yeah.
Last 2 years ago, you couldn't go anywhere. I just remember plowing snow and putting houses down and the flooding issues and all of that. So yeah, you're right. We kind of had a back-to-back year that was sort of dismal. And now this year it's great. I mean, a couple podcasts ago, I was talking in depth about having and needing an extension, especially with the wheelhouse, because I had come out to the lake, didn't have an extension with me. And I had my house all the way down, to the ice, and I barely got through. So, I figured auger extensions would be the next thing because we had that cold snap. Now, as we're starting to warm up here, it's almost that big shift once again where, people are still out fishing. They're getting out fishing, but we went from extreme cold temperatures to warmer temperatures here. So we'll see how long, the driving, the truck traffic, the wheelhouse traffic continues, because it always in March, it could go either way, right? We could have a really cold, nasty March, or it could be extremely warm. I've always heard March as like in with the lion, in like a lion, out with a lamb, or vice versa. Yep. So, well, thank you guys for being on the podcast. Appreciate it. I'm glad we're having a great winter. It's great to hear from you guys. Good luck the rest of the year. And of course, I'll see you as we get on the ice.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Sounds
Tony.
good. Thanks.
Welcome back. My next guest is Mike Anselmo. This guy's been around the fishing industry for a long time. I've worked with him in various companies in the industry. He knows a lot about fishing companies.
Sure, worn a lot of hats, right?
Mike, you've been around, been a good friend of mine. I've always enjoyed fishing with you, talking with you. Welcome to our podcast. In this portion of our podcast, we're really breaking down kind of the broad spectrum of last year versus this year in the ice industry. And, obviously it's two extremes. Last year was, I think for anybody that lives on this planet, one of the weirdest winters that we've ever encountered, at least in this region. And this year is probably one of the best winters I've encountered as an ice angler, just because of ice conditions, the fishing, accessibility, and just sort of that pent up ice fishing. I don't even know how to describe it.
Like the lack of culture, like the culture that disappeared on us for 24 months came back with a vengeance. Like everybody was so starved for it. You got to remember, last year was a bad ice year. The previous year, we had a lot of snow cover and we had tough ice conditions in a lot of different parts of the upper Midwest. Last year, yeah, void of ice, warm weather. It was like the double nail in the coffin. Like if you wanted to be out, you just couldn't go out, period. And yeah, to walk into great conditions starting really early this year, I think from the fisherman's perspective, the brands and manufacturers, the retailers. Like, it was a reinvigorating start to the season. And I know everybody was really nervous as we kind of got through the end of November and into the beginning of December. It's like you have that like false sense of security, like false hope. And all we did was get more and more and more of these better conditions, and lakes froze early, and suddenly the customers like showed back up at retail. They're looking for their stuff. They wanted their new spoons, their new sleds, their new whatever it is. And yeah, the resorts and lodges got busy. Like, it couldn't have been a more flipped season, from this year to last year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I can't believe the amount of anglers that came out in droves with their otters, their flipovers, their wheelhouses, their trucks. Everybody was ice fishing, not just on the weekends. It was all week long. And I can't even describe this. Like, I don't want to call it pent up ice fishing anger, but it was like this desire that was beyond desire.
Yeah.
I interviewed some folks with Yeti talking about fish houses, and I almost forgot about 2 years ago, because I'm on the ice every day as a guide. Almost forgot 2 years ago was almost equally as bad as last year, just because of the amount of snow and the lack of wheelhouses, and the way you could get around on the lake was very tough. I would actually consider 2 years ago almost more difficult conditions than even last year, because last year, despite the warm temperatures, I was on the ice every single day.
Yeah, and you're a different animal, right? So you're the exception, not the rule. People follow you. One, you do it for business, right? And you also have the responsibility for dialed in angling. Like, you're trying to bring this fresh content to people week in and week out. So you get to go seek out that stuff. But when the camera quits rolling, you also have a business to operate from a guide's perspective. So yeah, you found it. But for, say, just call it the 494, 694 ring in the Twin Cities, right? Those folks they just didn't have accessibility. Right. And if they were trying to get to the Brainerd Lakes area or Mille Lacs or, Alex, different like even parts of South Dakota, Wisconsin, like it's not that there was bad ice, there was no ice.
I know we talk about it that, we launched Dial in Angling obviously last year on one of the worst ice seasons ever. So seeing reports from like Marcus Quam, for example, I felt so bad for Marcus last year. I literally wanted to pick up the phone every week and be like, "How you doing, man?" Needed a support group. But a lot of the industry as a whole, when your business, when you rely on ice anglers for your main core business, like a company like Otter,
Sure. Well, how about tourism's perspective? So
there you go.
Mille Lacs Tourism is one of the people that I do some work for, and so I've been coming up, every week, every other week, just getting some kind of social content and keeping some of those channels active and moving forward. And I was so happy for a lot of the community up here, because coming up on a Wednesday and talking to Justin at Hunter's Point and having every one of his rentals full on a Wednesday, and sort of, that middle of the season when there's not a lot of excitement left to sell. It's just sort of accessible and available. But people they're chomping at the bit. It's middle of the week now, and we're sort of we're doing this, and we're on a lake that after the walleye season is closed, and there's still a lot of people fishing, and that's great to see. Like, this is a year people can't get enough.
I think big lakes like Mille Lacs, well, all the resorts across the ice belt were hurting last year. But lakes like Mille Lacs, I spent a lot of time ice fishing last year, but what I would consider my home body of water, I didn't come out on Mille Lacs that much last year, because it was just so kind of, after we had those like January rains, for example, most of the time on Mille Lacs, you're not fishing on the shoreline breaks, right? You're not, fishing 100 yards off a shore. You're fishing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 miles out. And so last year, I didn't spend a ton of time on Mille Lacs after mid to late January. And I know just from working around this lake summer and winter, this summer, everybody was just starving to have people come up this summer. And, just seeing the amount of people that we have out here this winter kind of brings things back. And seeing a lot of my customers come to Mille Lacs that we're excited about fishing Mille Lacs again.
Yeah.
And it had to do obviously with ice conditions and then the perch story.
Yep. Which, I mean, come on, it's even the people that have done this, like talking to Steve from Portside and some of the people that have been here and been through it, like for the better part of a lifetime. There's a lot of folks saying that this is the best run of those fish that they've ever seen in this lake. Like, there had been some good perch bites in the past, but I think you and I talked about it maybe yesterday, early in the day on the phone. Like, I don't think they're really stuck to anything here. Like, it's not an isolated pocket of fish, like just in one region of the lake. I think you could go to the geographical center of this lake, punch holes, and probably find, perch like in different size ranges. So it's not just one year class. It's not just one location. They're kind of back. I think this is going to hold up for a while. And between that and the positive news, coming out of the potential for some increased walleye limits this year, Mille Lacs is going to be a busy place for a while, and that's great.
Definitely. And a lot of these lakes, I'm fortunate enough to, besides dial-it angling and running a guide service, I love to fish. So when I get a day off, I take my son out fishing. I want to experience wheelhouse fishing. We want to experience winter camping. We want to experience going to lakes and finding panfish. We want to go to lakes and find walleyes. So I've been all over the ice belt this year, and it's not just a Mille Lacs thing. Everyone is experiencing a great year, from Devil's Lake, North Dakota, all the way over to Green Bay. Everybody's had this reemergence of people interested in ice fishing. I love to see it. I love to hear businesses talk about it. I did a podcast early in the year. It was actually after I shot a Mille Lacs perch episode, and I went and interviewed everyone around the lake to get their take on not the difference from last year to this year, but how perch populations have impacted their business. And I think all of them were talking about perch and we're excited about perch. Obviously, a lot of them had been impacted greatly because of perch numbers, but all of them were super excited just to be back on the ice, doing their normal thing, plowing roads, seeing customers, seeing people come up from the Twin Cities or from out of state, and just excited about ice fishing again.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of a, positivity is contagious kind of a thing. So, and this as good as anybody, like, you can hardly ever make anybody happy when it comes to, some of the politics around fishing and some of the different lakes and what have you. But this year almost felt like the year of the perch in a lot of places, Mille Lacs included. Mississippi River, the Dakotas were on fire. There were some good runs of perch on some different bodies of water in Wisconsin. It does. It almost feels like this year was contagious. I know a lot of people. I've got an 11-year-old son. I know a lot of people with kids around his age that all fished for the first time this year. I know a lot of people that fished in different places. Like, they had to go dig out their old houses, find their stuff. Like, this was the year that they got back out on the ice. And I think it's been overwhelmingly positive for the entire industry. I think the retailers are going to finish this year very happy. I think the brands are going to go into their sales season for next year happy, working with the retailers, working on their new products, finding out what sold well this year. And I think the consumers are going to kind of look and go, all right, like, I'm back in. Like, we had such a great year last year. Like, it gives you something to look forward to. And, as a fisherman, like, I like to see people fishing, right? I like to watch dialed in angling too. Like, I'm a fan. So when you have all the marketing pieces to go with all of the great brand stuff that's going on, new tackle, new equipment, new whatever it is from the different companies, and then you've got great conditions like this, it's like, yeah, this year I wish we could get a couple more weeks out of it. I know we can't, but I wish we could. But it makes you look forward to next year like just that much more.
Awesome. Mike, thanks for sitting down with me. I really appreciate you taking the time. Always enjoy talking to you, picking your brain about different things when it comes to fishing. We're both fish heads, so we can relate to the same things. Thanks again, Mike. Really appreciate it. Mike Anselmo, the man that wears a lot of hats. Thanks again, buddy.
Yeah.
My next guest is no stranger to ice fishing. He runs a guide service. Brad Hawthorne of Hawthorne Guide Service. Thanks for sitting down on the Dialing Angling podcast.
How's it going?
Great, man. The whole concept and the whole topic that we've been going over, I've interviewed several people now talking about how radically different last season is versus this ice season, how it's changed their business, just fishing in general, their take on it. What's your take? You know, we had an unprecedented ice season last year. This year, it seems to be off the charts. You know, what's kind of your story and your take on that whole scenario?
Well, I think last year caught everyone completely off guard. You know, those things you take for granted. For instance, having a winter was number one, where I never thought when we entered into our first early ice period last year, and then it hung on that whole period throughout the whole year. I mean, we only had 22 days of rental last year. I don't think the local banks were prepared for that. I don't think the local economy was prepared for that. And the thing about, you know, the perch this year everyone's talking about, we were whacking them last year too, but we just couldn't access them because of the ice conditions. But yeah, so there's a lot of changes. The shorter season, the 100-year weather event. But you knew it, Tony. I mean, we were whacking perch last year, and now this year everyone's talking about the perch, and last year kind of going, keeping it quiet.
Yeah, for me, you know, fishing Mille Lacs last year, I was just really apprehensive because it wasn't up until we got that rain, right? When we experienced that rain event and then the next rain event where I was like, you know what, I got to pull the pin on Mille Lacs and just focus in on small lakes. I spent a lot of time in northern Minnesota. Quite frankly, a lot of my guide trips that got canceled. I was busy with Dialed In Angling, so I was able to kind of leave Mille Lacs. So yes, it was just a shocker. I always look at like the guys that run an ice business out in Green Bay, how sometimes they have a great ice year and then other years it's real shaky. I always used to tell my customers, you know, that would be kind of on that outside fringe of the ice belt, like maybe they're from southern Iowa or Missouri or, you know, St. Louis, Missouri, Indiana. They would call and say, hey, it's 50 degrees down there. Are we on? And I always tell them, in Minnesota, we always get winter.
Yeah.
Right. And up until last year, that's always been the case. You know, you could have a warm winter elsewhere and we always get frigid cold temperatures. Last year was a lot different. I was able to fish as much as I wanted. I think the fishing last year was actually incredible. Like you touched on, the perch fishing was great out here. The walleye fishing was incredible out here.
Yes.
I remember going to a mud flat like in February where I was like, okay, we had a kind of a freeze up for, you know, a few days anyway after the rains. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get out to a flat because I have some customers that want to get out to Mille Lacs. Zipped out there. Everything was good. There hadn't been a hole drilled.
No.
And it was a real popular like community mud flat, right? And there had not been a single hole drilled there. And we dropped down, we whacked fish. I had some customers that came out. I felt comfortable taking them out. And then after that, it's just things were shaky. And it wasn't that we didn't have ice. It was just I wasn't comfortable enough bringing people out to where I felt the fishing was good and safe.
Yeah, correct. The ice conditions last year too were, we kind of hung around that 9 to 12 inches. But what I think the reason we didn't see a lot of traffic was our temperature swings were so drastic last year. We would go from 10 degrees to 45. And that was kind of our swing. We kept doing that on a week-to-week basis. And then you say it would rain and it would fill the low spots and then the ice got aerated. But you're right. We went out, 8 Mile, one of the most popular spots in the whole lake. We go out just dead center in the middle of 8 Mile, which is a great wintertime spot, by the way. Like you said, there's no holes out there. There's not arguably one of the most popular spots on the whole lake. And all the four-wheeler trails stopped because I think during early season, people started that natural progression of getting offshore, getting a half mile, and they just stopped. And I think they gave up, like you're saying.
Well, I think you get out there and you're intimidated, like no one's around. I remember being out there and being like, it's a little spooky because I don't see anything. I don't see a four-wheeler. I see zero. And so for you and I that spend our lifetime on an ice sheet, if we're spooked, the average person, if they leave shore, so I understand. And, I had a lot of customers last year that were just like, hey, we talk to our wives. They don't want us going ice fishing. They've seen the negative reports. They saw the bad ice conditions, the big news headlines. So I understand. I have a wife and kids as well, and I understand the stress level there. This year, though, radically different, man. We hit the ice running, the proverbial ice running. I know I talked to you throughout the season a few times, and you were busy as heck. I saw your truck zipping around Garrison. We talked earlier, you haven't had much of a break since Christmas. I hit the ice running, filming, and guiding, and it's just like, I love late ice. I absolutely love late ice, but I'm ready to take a break and get things done around the house.
Yeah. It's this year, I think, was having a year off of Tony, we run so hard, right? We run so hard. I've watched you and you've watched me for years. And by the end of the year, we're looking forward to this warm weather period that we get to kind of warm our bones up and the fish bite better. And this year, after having kind of a half a year off last year, we're going into it going, everyone caught enough fish to keep them satisfied. The weather's beautiful. And now everyone's just tired. And I think next year, we didn't catch all the perch out of Mille Lacs, and we got kind of a year off. The fish last year gave us, what I would like to say is, our bigger perch. There's no way to remove all the big perch out of here. So those will continue. We'll have brood stock, spawning stock going into, and I think we kind of set Mille Lacs up at least for the next 3 to 5 years. And that was due to that 100-year weather event. Like you said, no one was able to actively fish the basin areas or anything more than a mile and a half offshore of Mille Lacs for a whole winter. That's incredible.
And it's really, it kind of jogged my memory because I've been talking to a few different folks on this podcast, and I forgot how much snow we had the 2 years prior. So, it's really been 2 to 3 years. A lot of people have asked me, where'd all these perch come from? Well, they've been here, but they grew up really fast when we weren't ice fishing, right? And so to have an ice year like this, it's been great. I love seeing all the people out on Mille Lacs, all the people on Winnie, on Lake of the Woods, on Red, all these fishing reports coming out of South Dakota, North Dakota. Everybody was ice fishing. I walked into tackle shops that looked like a bomb went off, right? Because they're just absolutely getting inundated with people that are excited about fishing. My kids are talking about it. My son's buddies, that's all they want to do on their day off is ice fish. And it's great. So I love that we had a year like we had this year to get people kind of fired up again. It's great to see communities of wheelhouses out, people partying, the social aspect of it, the hardcore guys that were able to get out early ice and now late ice. Fantastic year. Brad, thanks for sitting down with me on the podcast and kind of sharing and giving us your insight into fishing. You're a wealth of knowledge. Thanks again, my friend, for being on the Dialed In Angling podcast. onX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Download the app today to get fisheries information in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin, along with research tools for serious anglers and beginners alike. Filter lakes by species, trophy only, keeper fish, abundance, or all of the above. Plan which lakes to fish with the app, navigate to the accesses, and once you're there, use the onX best-in-class weather imagery and fishing hotspots to catch more fish. onX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you would never known existed. onX Fish, the app that is changing the game on ice. My next guest is Sam Larson. He is a freelance graphic designer, does a lot of stuff in the fishing industry. Sam and I have worked together over the years, I would say on and off for, I've known you for at least a decade now.
10 years.
Again, a fellow fish head and lives in the Bemidji area. Sam, the whole premise of this portion of the podcast is just talking about the changes from last year being a strange anomaly, hopefully, to this year being one of the best ice seasons we've had on record, at least more normal than we've had the last few seasons.
Yeah, and it's good. Like I said, last year, Bemidji, we had ice, but it's probably the first time since I've been in Bemidji, which is 2012, that I don't think I took a truck on the ice once.
Right.
And that really limited it down to the hardcore guys that were getting out in four-wheelers, walking. I did a lot of walking that year because it was easy to get around, no snow. But it was just kind of sad to see Lake Bemidji without the normal fish houses. It was just a different year. And it's so nice to be back into this year where, my buddies are getting out across the state. Everyone's fishing. We haven't been blasted with snow either, so the accessibility is really good. It's just good for the sport. Ice fishing is a big community sport, and it's good to see everyone out there getting after it.
Heck yeah. I mean, I was telling people earlier, and a lot of my customers and just people I talk to, that I didn't drive a truck on the ice last year either. And coming from someone that has ice fished his whole life, I've run a ice fishing business and a guiding business for well over 20 years. Never drove my truck on the ice. I never drove my wheelhouse out. I know there was people with wheelhouses out last year. So it's not like we didn't have ice. I mean, in northern Minnesota we did, but southern Minnesota, they didn't have ice. Anywhere outside the fringes of the ice belt, they definitely didn't have ice. I mean, we did have ice. I fished for Dialed In Angling, but I didn't have my truck on the ice. I didn't have a wheelhouse out. I walked, looking back to all the Dialed In Angling what we shot last year. I think the first 5 episodes I walked out, and sometimes it was quite a ways. I think it was the second episode of the year. We were on Red Lake and we walked out like a mile and a half, So yeah, dramatically different. I don't know that I've had a fishing experience, maybe a couple in the first week where we walked out, and then I was on wheelers, I was on snowmobiles. I mean, it happened quickly, and all of a sudden then we were driving,
Yeah.
And now obviously we're still driving on the lakes. We've been talking about, quite the change from last week 30 below to this week being 45. I'm a little concerned about the landings and some of these cracks and heaves, but we have a ton of ice, which is great to see.
Yeah. And it's kind of the perfect conditions this year because being up in Bemidji, if we get too much snow, then it gets hard to get into a lot of these little backcountry lakes that I like to go to and whatnot, because they don't plow the logging road that goes back to them or whatnot. So it's like you said, the perfect storm of ice conditions where we have solid, safe ice where, you don't have to be too cautious out there. It's always good to know what you're running into. But yet you can get anywhere. You're not dealing with slush. You're not getting trucks stuck. It's good.
I like exploring. So this year has been exploratory for me. It seems like the last really 3 seasons, because 2 years in a row, we had a lot of snow. And then last year with, literally no ice. I don't like exploring when I'm worried about ice conditions, but you touched on these backwoods lakes. I love exploring backwoods lakes I haven't fished. The show is sponsored by Onyx Fish.
Mm-hmm.
I love that app. I scroll through that app constantly looking at, DNR stocking data, their fall assessments, everything that has to do with the lake. Also, landings and accesses and roads into those lakes.
Say the access stuff is huge because when I was up in college in Bemidji, there's a lot of stuff that's like, I think this is public, or you're trying to dig up old plot books or go. And then, I come to find out some of the stuff you're accessing wasn't really public. But now with Onyx, it's amazing, like what you can get into and find little nooks and crannies. Lakes that I didn't think ever had public access have a little sliver here and there. And it's just awesome to be able to explore. And another thing is too, like, talking about the swings of Mother Nature and 2019, 2020, we had a lot of really hard winters, a lot of snow, and some of those lakes winter killed. So back to exploring. Now it's been a few years. I'm kind of going back to some of those old college lakes that I used to fish that I know winter killed. And it's fun to see them finally starting to rebound and come back and get to the fish that used to be there.
I love doing that. It's like one of my favorite things. And I know a few years ago we had some pretty significant winter kill in lakes, because I know last year when I was exploring lakes for Dialed In Angling, we actually shot a backwoods lake episode where Travis Frank and I walked in about a mile into this lake. And when I was exploring for that episode, I hit a couple different lakes a few days in a row. And I was surprised that one of my favorites was gone, right? There was nothing in that lake. And, so having said that, I also want to explore lakes that I know haven't gotten touched for several years and to see how they fared that I didn't get a chance to check last year. And I've been doing that. My son, Robbie, Robbie, he loves to fish as well. And so I can always talk Robbie into finding a panfish lake somewhere. So I'll be like, dude, check this out. And actually he's been on his Onyx app a lot, like showing me like when we're driving. Like last weekend, we were driving to a lake, and he's like, "Hey, have you ever checked out this one?
Fish this one."
He's
too?
like, "Look at the data on it."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Dang, I got to check that out." So, so being able to explore this year, doing a lot of things, just normal things in ice fishing, get it done now because we're losing ice rapidly. We haven't lost any ice yet, but we're losing access points.
Exactly.
That'll be the first thing to go. And when that happens, it takes time to explore. You lose the fact. I like to explore 2, 3, sometimes 4 lakes in a row. And especially if they're kind of all together, you can hit 3 or 4 lakes in one day and just scan and look and see what's there. Sometimes I'll fish very little, but I hunt more than I fish.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And going back to like talking about lakes too, even exploring those lakes that maybe you tried 5-10 years ago that didn't have anything with them, seeing that rebound, you never know what you're going to find. And with today's sonar, it's so easy to knock out a bunch really quick and look for stuff.
I fished a lake this year with my son. It was really fun because it had winter killed about in that 5, 6, 7 years, about 6 years ago, I think was kind of the time frame. So whatever happened that winter, the water levels were low and we had snow and oxygen levels and it had killed the lake, but it wasn't an entire kill, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't an entire winter kill. And so everybody kind of quit fishing it. And Robbie's actually the one who kind of brought it up to me. Like, we should go check that lake out. And I was like, I don't know if it's ready yet. And he's like, well, I'm going to go explore. And then he came back with like, you won't believe the amount of bluegills and crappies.
Yeah.
They weren't great size yet. Like that lake in particular used to be known for big bluegills and then okay crappies, right? The crappie numbers were good, but the gills were really massive. What we found were big numbers of gills and crappies. They weren't quite that size structure yet, but we kept a few fish to bring home. And they were like
in your pocket for the next couple of years because you know that genes are still in there and hopefully they get back to where they were too.
Exactly. And we know that next year or the following year, we're going to check on it. And it has little or no pressure at all because people just kind of forget about things, all these lakes cycle, they're cyclical. Some lakes get pressure, then the pressure goes away. For 2 or 3 years with no one ice fishing, I can think of so many different lakes that I've hit just because you haven't been able to get to it. And it's been a fun season from that aspect. And I know up where you live in Bemidji is just like the mecca of lakes. You can go.
I say I've been up there for over 10 years now. And I used to have a little boat as well as ice fishing. And 10 years, I still haven't fished every lake with public access in Beltrami County. Like, no, it's amazing. I'm kind of making an effort to try to do that. I got a few left, but it's just crazy the amount of lakes within a 45-minute drive of us.
You're blessed in that aspect. A lot of lakes in Minnesota, there's a lot of counties that you can think of. Otter Tail County, Beltrami County, Cass County, Aiken. The list goes on. We're so lucky in Minnesota to have all these fisheries, and all of them, especially in northern Minnesota, have these backwoods lakes that and how glorified it sounds and how much I put it on a pedestal. You know how many lakes that I go back into that are all bust?
Yeah.
Way more than the better ones. But when you find a good one, it just feels that much better.
Yep. Yeah. And it's just fun. It's fun fishing. You're usually out there by yourself. It's hard to beat. And this is, coming towards the end of the season, this is the great time to do it because a lot of the bigger lakes, from having hard houses and trucks going on, their accesses are getting blown out from the salt and the dirt. And a lot of those backwoods lakes, that's walking or four-wheeler, as long as there's not too much junk on the shore that those reeds are going to heat up and make some soft spots, this is the best time of the year to explore. It's easy. You can hole hop without everything freezing over.
Sight fishing.
Yep. Yes. Oh, gosh, that's another one that's just unreal. Those little lakes.
Sam, we could go on and on and on. I could talk sight fishing the rest of the day or late ice fishing. So
I love it.
For that matter. thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really
Thanks for
appreciate your
having me.
input. Good luck fishing the rest of the season. Stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling podcasts coming your way. My next guest is Barry Chavarria of Otter. He's the sales manager at Otter. I'm a huge Otter guy, so I'm happy to be sitting with Barry. Barry and I have worked together in various aspects of the industry for the last 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
Barry, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me.
My previous guest, we've kind of covered the subject of radical ice seasons last year versus this year. You know, I've talked to guides, I've talked to other people in the industry, bait shop owners, you know, just everybody's excitement about the ice year that we're having. And then also kind of what we experienced last year. You know, for me as a guide, it's so much different, you know, the last 2 seasons. What are you seeing from consumers? What are you seeing at Otter? Kind of what's your take on it last year to this year?
Yeah. No, you said it best. I mean, we're definitely due for a great ice season, and we got that. I mean, we had good, you know, fishable, walkable ice, you know, really right after the St. Paul show, that following weekend. So that was awesome. Yeah. From the manufacturing side, it's just great to see people to get out and the product that they've purchased the past year or two that maybe they've only been able to use once or twice. They're getting out and they're seeing what they like, they don't like, you know, they're upgrading in some circumstances, you know, just accessorizing some of their shelters and that's awesome to see. So,
yeah, I think ice anglers more than any other anglers accessorize, right? And Otter has tons of great accessories. And the more you get out there, it seems like the more you realize, oh, I need this, I need that. Or you see other anglers with different things. I can think of lots of different products that Otter makes as far as accessories that you don't really think about unless you're ice fishing all the time or you're going through the full spectrum of ice season like we had this year. You touched on people walking out early ice, right? Last year, I walked out a ton, right? And I realized last year I didn't have an Otter sport sled. I had great big sleds. I had hitches. I had every accessory that Otter makes except for a handheld sled, right?
Yep.
A really light ultra sled. Well, I was walking sometimes miles at a time. And so realizing I needed that sled. So I got that last year. This year, as far as some of the new products, you know, with Dialed In Angling, we did some ice camping. I know Otter has a lot of great products coming out. We also have products that came out last year as far as the tables, the accessories.
Yep.
It's great to see the full spectrum of ice fishing. Are you seeing from because I always think of Otter as like the hardcore guy, from the hardcore angler to, you know, even the person that's just an occasional angler. They rely on Otter because of good reason. We specialize in ice. We're ice anglers. You got some of the best product development in the country when it comes to ice fishing.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing as far as a shift in the industry when it comes to shelters, accessories, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, for a number of years, Otter, the flip overs were kind of that go-to number one shelter. You know, they're still great today, right? You're able to be mobile all the time. You know, if the bite's slow, you can pick up, move. They're easy to kind of throw in the back of the pickup, and they're durable and they last a long time. Over the last, I'd say probably 3 to 4 years, we've seen our hubs sort of take over. I'd say that desired shelter space from the flip overs and sort of a flip flop. So I think that just you know, as these road systems get better and you know, some of the resorts that are able to maintain that, you know, you're able to drive out. It just makes things easier as if you're a new angler to get out, spend a little bit of time out here, not have to bring a lot of equipment. You don't necessarily need a pickup to get that out. But yeah, and then on the accessory side, I mean, it's gosh, we had a great year this year with accessory business as a whole. Everything from lights to the QA, our quick attach accessories for all the hubs. The table that you mentioned too, the aluminum roll top table. Everything that's kind of that traditional ice accessory, and then you throw in some, kind of that ice camping aspect too, and it just crosses over, and it just makes, at the end of the day, I think Otter's just, the MO is to kind of make ice fishing easier and make it more enjoyable. And if we can do that, then you're going to have customers coming back every single year looking to improve.
I want to touch on like the hub versus flip over, because as a guide, as a hardcore angler, I like both. Up until a couple of years ago, I'd say 3 years ago, never used a hub, right? I was always flip over. If I needed a bigger flip over, it was the resort. If I needed a small flip over, it was the cottage, right? It would, and cabin in between, and lodge in between. But I would say I lived in my lodge and cabin the most, right? Those are the two flip overs that I used all the time, and day in and day out with their customers. We had them daisy chained together. It didn't matter the group size. We were getting them out in flip overs. We could move them around. Great. Fast forward to hubs, right?
Yep.
And actually, it was 2 years ago when I started embracing hubs. What I liked about the hub is you could move around. My customers liked it. You had a little more space. It was more social. If you had a group of 4, like a family, for example, they weren't in 2 flip overs, right? They were together in the hub, and they had room to move around. Now you add tables, accessories, different chairs. You've got forward-facing sonar. We have underwater cameras. I mean, all this cool equipment that we can put in the hub, now we can fit it in there, and you can be just about as mobile with the hub. And you also talked about hubs. It's great because if I'm going out, let's say in a small vehicle or in my Ranger, my 4-wheeler, I can fit that hub either in one of my Otter sleds that I tow behind, or it sits right on top of the rack. I had it so many times where I'd put my hub right on top of my monster box, strap it down, and now I don't even have to pull anything to get out there. You get the hub up. So I still use both. I'm a huge fan of flip overs. I like, at times when we have them hooked up to our machines, we're not catching fish. You forward-facing sonar, you're shooting out. All of a sudden you see fish at 100 feet. Flip them up. We don't even collapse them down. Race to that spot in the snow. Flip them back over, and you're fishing.
Yep.
That's the cool part about a flip over. But it takes away from that social aspect. And, there's times where I've learned, too, with forward-facing sonar that you got to get set up. You got to be quiet. You don't want that sled dragging on the ground. You just got to wait for them to come to you. There's plenty of those times. We're learning so much with technology that it changes the way we fish and what we fish in. And so this year is a great testing year. We've had extreme cold temperatures. We've had everything from early ice in December all the way to now we're getting into March. We've still got ice. Awesome testing grounds. This is why I fish otter. Barry, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah.
Giving us your take. Stay tuned. We got a few more interviews as we wrap up the Dialed In Angling podcast. Okay, in closing, I just want to wrap up this podcast. First of all, thanking all the guests that were willing to contribute to this week's podcast. Nick Sakella for going on a journey with me up to Red Lake and kind of reliving the old glory days. I just want to leave you guys with one thing, my 2 cents on the whole Red Lake crappie, segment, podcast, episode. Really encourage people to tune in, check it out this week. It was one of the funnest episode that I filmed next to maybe Mille Lacs Perch. It's very special, just maybe because I was reminiscent of days gone by of catching those giant crappies and what a special fishery that Red Lake was and now is once again. And so, I want to see this thing flourish for years to come. I'd love people to use extreme discretion as far as keeping those bigger fish and just not, returning them back in the water, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. And then just keeping some smaller crappies and just, using some self-control when it comes to the fishery up there, because I would love to see it for years and years to come. I think Red Lake is a great fishery as it is right now, with great walleye fishing. Now you've got a crappie fishery that's back. It's super unique. You don't get that anywhere across the country, let alone the ice belt. So let's take care of it as anglers, and just being good stewards and releasing these fish, enjoying it while it's here. I hope it lasts for years to come. I can't wait to take my kids up there. I hope a lot of people experience it. So check out this week's episode of Dialed In Angling. It's been a fun season. It was great recapping with a lot of my guests today, that all of which spend a lot of time on ice, and a lot of them have been in the industry for a long time. So they see kind of the ebbs and flows of different ice seasons, but having one extreme ice season to the next, it was great to kind of hash out, get their thoughts, their ideas on this subject. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to the podcast this week. We'll be back again next week. Make sure you tune in to Dialed In Angling again this week. Check out the Red Lake Crappie episode. It was super fun to shoot. I can't wait to get back up there and experience it. The Red Lake Crappies are back. Until next week, I'm Tony Roach. This has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast.